It's one of the continents worst affected by climate change. An estimated 600 million people in Africa don't have access to electricity. Even greater numbers live without clean cooking fuels or technologies. The continent accounts for less than 6% of global energy consumption and 2% of cumulative global emissions. Experts say it has the potential to play a leading role as the world's energy systems transition to a net zero future. Our prospective guest is one of them. We're joined now by Dr. Rebekah Shirley, Deputy Director at the World Resources Institute Africa. Great to have you with us this morning, Rebekah. So firstly, you say that there is immense potential for renewable power in Africa. So why aren't more people investing in the continent?
Thank you so much for the question, and it's a great one. As you've said, there's so much potential across the continent. It's been likened to the Saudi Arabia of renewable energy. I'm calling in from Nairobi, Kenya, where we have almost 90% of electricity on the grid here is already being produced through green sources like geothermal power, hydropower, wind power. We have the second most productive wind farm on the entire globe is based here in Kenya. So really fantastic resources. But what I would say is, in addition to those clean energy resources, and in fact, on the continent, we have as much as 19 times what the entire world would need in terms of energy by 2050. We have here just in our solar resource alone. In addition to that, we have all of the key minerals that the world needs to produce clean energy technology. So we're talking about the lithium, the cobalt, all of the heavy and critical metals. And we also have the youngest population in the world. In fact, they say young and getting younger. By 2050, 1 in every 4 persons born on the face of this earth, according to the United Nations, will be African. So we've got all of the ingredients, if you will, for a clean energy revolution, not just for Africa, but to serve the world. And your question is a good one. So if we've got all of that potential, we've got the minerals, we've got the materials, we've got the workforce, why aren't we seeing this avalanche of clean energy across the continent? What I've learned by designing and deploying projects here myself is that despite this vast clean energy potential, the financial flows to unlock that potential are troublingly scarce. So we often see projects and businesses here incurring compounding hidden premiums like the risk perception premium or the premium of foreign exchange, meaning paying back your euro dollar or your US dollar loan with constantly depreciating local currencies, or expecting to have to deliver conventionally high rates of return while raising revenues from customers that earn very little, oftentimes less than $1 a day. So for all of these different reasons, international finance markets are perhaps not appetized, and clean energy investments remain a trickle despite a pipeline of waiting projects. So effectively what this means is, as a globe, we are prioritizing risk to capital over a risk to human life. And I'll end by saying that although we're 17% of the global population now, going to be about 25% of global population 2050 and onwards, 90% of those still without basic access to energy, as you said. Today, we account for less than 2% of global clean energy finance. So that's a big part of unlocking the potential here.
And Rebekah, you've said that Africa doesn't have a fair playing field, that if it did, the energy future on the continent would create itself. Why doesn't it have a fair playing field? And is that the case right across the continent, or are some countries doing better than others?
Well, yeah, exactly as I was saying before, the fair playing field comes from this access to finance. So despite a very ready pipeline of projects, this is a big challenge for us, to access to finance. But another reason why the playing field may be unfair, or what we need to do to change that playing field and level it out, is to pay more attention to project development. So how do we actually take projects from an idea, from the potential, the theoretical potential, actually to an investment-ready project. So all of the work that has to go into the taking that idea, fleshing it out, thinking about a business model, thinking about the payback model, thinking about all of the technical components of a project, we need a lot of support in that phase. The second reason I would say why we also why it's not just about generation and having solar or hydro or geothermal is that on the continent we have very poor grid infrastructure. We call it a weak grid infrastructure, meaning that even if you've got a fantastic solar project that you've spec'd out and you've got an investor ready to invest in, how are those electrons going to make their way to communities, to households, to businesses? And so there's a lot of investment that's needed sort of behind the scenes on our grid infrastructure. And the best estimates from the International Energy Agency actually say that for every $1 million that we invest in generation, about 1.5 million would need to be invested in transmission and distribution. So it's a really complex situation, from the financing and the lack of available financing to the grid infrastructure and lack of investment in the grid to project development. And for all of those reasons, it's very difficult to secure investment despite this very ready potential across the continent. But you asked if there are some countries that are doing better. And in fact, that is the case, yes. Of course, we all know about the Just Energy Transition Pledge that South Africa was able to secure at the COP last year. But even without that type of pledge, many other countries are already pushing very heavily forward into renewables. As I mentioned, right here myself in Kenya, we've got, besides Iceland, we are the largest geothermal powerhouse on the continent. As I mentioned, a big powerhouse for wind energy. Even in West Africa, where renewable energy shares are generally lower, countries like Ghana are already generating over a third of their power through renewables as well. Countries like Namibia are at the forefront of thinking about new fuels like green hydrogen and their derivatives. So, and then beyond the renewable energy potential, there are so many countries that are thinking about nature-based solutions. How do we use our forest systems, our ecosystems, to present a guard for us against climate change? And here, of course, we're talking about the mighty Congo Basin, which is one of the world's largest carbon sinks. So yes, lots of advancement across the continent, even and in spite of the face of those difficulties.
Bearing all of that in mind then, Rebekah, what do you think we here in Europe can learn from what's happening in Africa? As you say, in Ghana, you're generating 90% of your energy from renewables currently.
Kenya, Ghana is about a third. And roughly across the continent, we actually do have quite high renewable energy shares. And we have very aggressive NDCs, nationally determined contributions, meaning what we're committing to in terms of decarbonization. A few things that I think that audiences in Europe could learn from our experience here in Africa is how very present climate change is with us. I'm seeing all of the images that you're showing across the screen while we're speaking, and the science is very clear that climate change is here. In fact, as a continent, we passed the 1 degree Celsius average temperature marker in 2015. And as of 2020, already 39 countries had already reported average temperatures more than 1 degree Celsius warmer. So we're now consistently being identified as one of the most vulnerable regions to climate change. Here in Kenya, despite all of our clean energy, we are in the midst of one of the most severe droughts in history. This is our 6th year of failed rains, and you can imagine what that spells for agriculture. I saw the images that you were displaying earlier. And of course, we're seeing not just increased droughts, but in countries like Mozambique, Tropical Storm Freddy just hit, and now we're having flash floods and increased levels of storm activity. So one lesson to learn from Africa is that climate change is already here. Another thing to learn is that what that means is not just the immediate effects to a community or to an ecosystem or to a country, but the knock-on effects. Our research at the World Resources Institute is already showing that increased desertification and deforestation, especially in these understudied areas like sub-Saharan African countries, are already causing massive displacement of people, of animals, of insects, meaning this is accelerating the spread of disease and conflict worldwide. And the research shows that there's a direct correlation between passing that 1 degree Celsius marker and increased migratory conflict. So that's the first thing to learn, is that climate change is here. The impacts are not just local, but they spread. There are knock-on effects that we're already beginning to experience. The second thing that I would say that there's the opportunity to learn from Africa is that this is thus the time for deep emissions reductions.
I'm very sorry for having to cut across you there, but we do need to finish up the interview. We could talk and talk all day with you. Thank you so much for being with us this this morning. That is Dr. Rebekah Shirley, Deputy Director at the World Resources Institute Africa. Thank you so much for your time.